You know what I never questioned for the longest time? Sandpaper. I just assumed it was the right way to finish a surface. You mill your boards, you cut your joints, you assemble the piece, and then you start sanding. 80 grit, 120, 150, 220, maybe 320 if you are feeling ambitious. That was the routine for me for over 30 years, and I never once stopped to ask whether there was a better way. Then, about 5 years ago, I was watching a documentary on traditional Japanese carpentry, and I saw something that stopped me cold. A man was running a hand plane across a board of hinoki cypress, and the shaving coming off that blade was so thin you could read a newspaper through it. But here is what got me. When he was done, that surface looked like it had been polished. No sandpaper, no finish yet, just raw wood that looked like glass. That was the moment I started digging into how Japanese carpenters have been finishing wood for over 400 years. Without sandpaper, and what I learned changed how I think about every surface I touch. Today, I am going to walk you through exactly how they do it and why it works so much better than what most of us were taught. Plus, stick around to the end because I will show you a dead simple water test that tells you instantly whether your surface is truly finished. Let me show you what I found. The Japanese hand planing tradition is one of the most refined surface finishing systems ever developed, and the remarkable thing is it was not built around luxury or decoration. It was built around performance. Once you understand the science behind why these craftsmen rejected abrasives centuries ago, you start to realize that sandpaper is not just a different method. In many ways, it is a compromise. So let me give you the background on where this comes from and why these people knew what they were doing. Japanese carpentry has a continuous tradition stretching back well over 1,000 years. The craftsmen who built the great temples and shrines, people like the Miyadaiku or temple carpenters, were working with soft woods like hinoki cypress and sugi cedar in a climate that throws everything at wood. Hot, humid summers, cold, dry winters, heavy rain, typhoons. If your finish did not hold up, the building suffered. And here is the key. For most of Japanese architectural history, they did not use protective coatings the way we think of them. No polyurethane, no lacquer on structural timbers. The wood itself had to resist the elements. So they developed a finishing philosophy built around one idea. Do not damage the surface of the wood. They understood, long before microscopes confirmed it, that the way you prepare a wood surface determines how that surface behaves for decades. A cleanly cut surface sheds water. A torn-up surface absorbs it, and the tool they built their entire finishing tradition around is the kana, the Japanese hand plane. The kana is not just a different version of a Western hand plane. It is a fundamentally different tool built around a different philosophy. And once I understood how it works, I understood why they never needed sandpaper in the first place. Let me start with the tool itself, because everything flows from here. A Western hand plane, the Stanley or record style most of us grew up with, has a blade-seated bevel, down at around 45 degrees. You adjust it with a mechanical mechanism, a lever cap, a depth adjuster, a lateral adjuster. It is a precision tool, and I still use mine every day. The kana works differently. The blade is seated bevel down in a wooden body, typically Japanese white oak or sometimes red oak, and it is held in place by friction and a wooden crosspin. There is no mechanical adjustment. You set the depth by tapping the blade with a small hammer. Tap the back of the blade to advance it, tap the back of the body to retract it. Adjustments are made in increments so small you cannot see them with the naked eye. The blade itself is laminated. A thin layer of extremely hard high-carbon steel, called hagain, is forged welded to a softer iron backing called jigain. That hard steel layer takes an edge that is almost unbelievably sharp. We are talking about an edge that, when properly honed, is measured in fractions of a micron. For comparison, a typical Western plane blade, honed on an 8000 grit, waterstone is sharp. A kana blade finished on a natural Japanese finishing stone can be 3 to 5 times sharper than that. And that difference in sharpness is not just about bragging rights. It is the entire reason this system works. Now, before a Japanese carpenter ever touches the kana to a board, he does something most of us skip entirely. He reads the grain, and I do not mean he glances at it. He studies it. He looks at the end grain to determine the growth ring orientation. He sights down the length of the board to see if the grain is rising or diving. He checks for interlocked grain, for knots, for areas where the fiber direction changes. And then he plans his planing direction based on what he sees. The reason is simple. If you plane against the grain, even with the sharpest blade in the world, you get tear out. The fibers lift and break instead of being sliced cleanly. Japanese carpenters call this sakame, reverse grain, and they treat it like an obstacle to navigate around, not power through. When I first started paying attention to grain direction the way they do, I was embarrassed by how many times I had been planing the wrong way and just sanding out the damage afterward. I had been creating a problem and then spending 30 minutes fixing it with sandpaper, when the real solution was to read the board before I started. By the way, if you are enjoying learning about these ancient methods, I put together something I think you will really appreciate. It is called Kenji's Workshop, and it is a collection of 100 ancient Eastern woodworking secrets for the modern craftsman, techniques like the ones we are covering today, and a whole lot more. You can grab your copy by scanning the QR code on screen, or just use the first link in the description. All right, let us keep going. This next part is the real heart of why Japanese carpenters banned sandpaper, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. When you run a properly tuned kana across a board, the blade slices through the wood fibers cleanly, like a razor cutting hair. Each cell wall is severed in a single pass. The surface left behind is made up of intact, closed cells lying flat and smooth. If you could look at it under a microscope, it would look like a row of neatly cut straws, all sealed at the top. Now compare that to what sandpaper does. Sandpaper works by abrasion. It does not slice fibers. It tears them, rolls them, crushes them, and rips them loose. Even fine grit sandpaper, 220 or 320, is dragging thousands of tiny sharp particles across the surface in random directions. The result under a microscope looks like a battlefield. Cell walls are shattered. Fiber ends are frayed and torn open. Loose debris is packed into the pores. The surface might feel smooth to your fingertip, but at a cellular level, it is damaged. And here is what really made me sit up. That damage is not just cosmetic. Those torn, open fibers behave completely differently than cleanly sliced ones when you apply a finish. Stain absorbs unevenly because some cells are torn open and some are crushed shut. That blotchiness we all fight with on softwoods like pine and cherry, a huge part of that is sanding damage. I spent years blaming the wood when I should have been blaming my finishing method. Now, once I understood the microscopic difference, the next thing clicked immediately, and this is the practical payoff that matters most. A surface with intact, cleanly sliced fibers naturally resists water and dirt in a way that a sanded surface simply cannot. Think about it this way. If you have a bundle of drinking straws and you slice them all cleanly at the top, water beads up and rolls off. The openings are sealed by the clean cut. But if you take those same straws and smash the tops with a hammer, crushing some open and splintering others, water soaks right in. That is exactly what is happening on your wood surface at a cellular level. Japanese carpenters understood this intuitively. A planned hinoki surface on a temple exterior can shed rain for decades without any applied finish. The wood itself becomes the finish. When I tested this in my own shop, I took 2 pieces of the same white oak board. I planned one with a well-tuned kana and sanded the other to 320 grit. Then I put a drop of water on each one. On the sanded piece, the water soaked in within about 15 seconds. On the planed piece, It sat on the surface as a bead for over 2 minutes before I wiped it away. Same wood, same board. The only difference was how the surface was prepared. That was the moment I truly understood why they never went back to abrasives. Now, here is the part that makes all of this achievable for you in your own shop. The secret to getting a finished surface straight off the counter is in the tuning, specifically the relationship between the blade and the chip breaker. The chip breaker, called the uragan, sits on top of the blade, and its job is to curl and break the shaving just as it is lifted by the cutting edge. When the chip breaker is set close to the cutting edge, within about 1/64 of an inch or less, it breaks the shaving almost instantly. This prevents the fibers ahead of the cut from splitting and lifting, which is what causes tear out. Japanese carpenters spend a tremendous amount of time flattening the mating face of the chip breaker so it contacts the blade perfectly, with no gaps. Even a tiny gap allows the shaving to wedge underneath, and you lose that clean cutting action. The blade itself is prepared with a hollow back, called the ura, which reduces the amount of steel you need to flatten during sharpening and ensures the cutting edge meets the chip breaker with perfect contact. When everything is tuned correctly, the shaving that comes off the blade is uniform, translucent, and almost weightless. And the surface left behind needs nothing else. No sanding, no scraping. It is done. I will tell you honestly, getting to that level of tuning took me months of practice. It is not something you master in an afternoon. But even early on, when my technique was still rough, the surfaces I was getting off the kana were noticeably better than anything I could achieve with sandpaper. Let me share some patterns I noticed in my own work over the years, habits I followed for decades that this tradition handles completely differently. No judgment here. I did all of these for longer than I care to admit. The first pattern is sanding as a default final step. Most of us treat sanding as the automatic last thing you do before finish. The piece comes off the clamps, and we reach for the random orbit sander without even thinking about it. But the Japanese approach treats the cutting tool as the finishing tool. The idea of adding an abrasive step after the blade has done its work would be like polishing a mirror with gravel. Once I stopped automatically sanding every surface and started evaluating whether the plane had already done the job, I saved hours on every project. The second pattern is sanding to fix tear out instead of preventing it. I did this for years. I would plane a board, see some tear out, and just sand it smooth. But all I was doing was masking the damage with more damage. The Japanese approach is to prevent tear out entirely by reading the grain, setting the chip breaker correctly, and taking lighter passes, prevention instead of repair. The third pattern is judging a surface by touch alone. We run our hand across a sanded surface, and if it feels smooth, we call it done. But smooth to the touch and smooth at the cellular level are two completely different things. A sanded surface can feel slick while being absolutely destroyed under a magnifying glass. Japanese carpenters judge a surface by how it reflects light. A properly planned surface has a natural luster, almost a glow, that no amount of sanding can replicate. Once you train your eye to see that difference, you will never trust your fingertips alone again. The fourth pattern is relying on finish to protect the wood instead of preparing the surface to protect itself. Most of us slap on 3 coats of polyurethane and call it protection. But if the surface underneath is torn up from sanding, that finish is bonding to damaged, uneven fibers. A planned surface accepts finish more evenly, bonds more strongly, and in many cases needs less finish to begin with. The wood does more of the work on its own. The good news is, once you see these patterns for what they are, you can start shifting your approach one project at a time. Now for that bonus tip I promised at the beginning. This is something I started doing after watching a Japanese carpenter check his work, and it takes about 10 seconds. It is called the water drop test. After you finish planing a surface, take a single drop of clean water and place it on the wood. Just one drop. Now watch it. If the surface is truly finished, meaning the fibers are cleanly sliced and intact, that water drop will bead up and sit on the surface like it is on a waxed car hood. It will hold its shape for a minute or more. If the surface still has torn fibers or areas where your blade was not quite sharp enough, the water will soak in quickly, usually within 10 to 20 seconds, and you will see it darken the wood in an uneven pattern. That dark spot tells you exactly where your surface still needs work. I use this test on every project now. It takes no special equipment, costs nothing, and gives you more honest feedback than your fingertips ever will. The first time I tried it, I was humbled. Surfaces I thought were perfect showed water soaking in within seconds, but it pushed me to improve my planing technique, and within a few months, I was consistently getting surfaces that held a water bead with no trouble at all. One more thing before I let you go. I spent a long time gathering the best ancient Eastern woodworking methods I have come across, and I put them all into a book called Kenji's Workshop. 100 techniques that most modern woodworkers have never seen, with step-by-step photos and clear explanations you can actually follow in your shop. Scan the QR code on screen right now, or grab it from the first link in the description. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one.